Today's Tidbit is brought to you by Express Tune and Lube, David, Bozeman, Johnson Law, and Georgia Power. The LeConte plantation was located in McIntosh County, Georgia. Today it's part of the LeConte Woodmanston Plantation and Botanical Garden National Historic Site. It's open daily to the public for hiking, picnicking, and a self-guided garden tour. It's only 76 miles from Statesboro, and it takes an hour and 15 minutes. My daddy, Paul G. Franklin Jr., and Dr. George Rogers were two of the early volunteers at this site many years ago. They were rewarded for this with a baby LeConte camellia. Here is this plant at our home 40 years later. John Eaton LeConte was the founder of the Woodmanston Plantation. He had two sons, John Eaton Jr., who was a noted naturalist and topographical engineer who explored and recorded much of the Smoky Mountains, and another son, Lewis, who was a trained medical doctor. He cared for his family, the slaves, and other family members in the area. Physicians in the late 1800s concocted their own medications for local herbs and plants. In 1813, due to his interest in botany and horticulture, he began to develop a botanical and floral garden at Woodmanston that became internationally famous. In 1765, John Bartram, the American naturalist, passed by Woodmanston. 15 miles from the plantation, he discovered the now famous Franklinia altamaha. By the early 1800s, botanists from around the world were drawn to this region of rare and unknown plants. They found many of these plants at Woodmanston under the care of Mr. LeConte. Lewis had a great knowledge of coastal Georgia's native flora. He associated with the likes of William Baldwin, John Abbott, Stephen Elliott, Thomas Nuttall, and John Torrey. Many of these men visited Woodmanston, where LeConte led them on specimen collecting excursions. Well, I've been on specimen collecting excursions with my daddy and Dr. Rogers. Sometimes we took a camera, and sometimes, we took a shovel. The botanical garden at Woodmanston was over an acre. He had a large collection of camellias, some as high as 15 feet and a trunk with a foot in diameter. He cultivated 40 different species of flowering bulbs. In the bog behind the formal gardens, he grew water-loving plants like cannas, spider lilies, and native hibiscus. When Louis LeConte died in 1838, there were no finer specimens of Camellia japonica and bulb-type daffodils growing in any single garden in America. And this is just right down the road from us in Statesboro. Louis LeConte and his wife Anne had 7 children. One son was named John, who became a famous scholar in the natural sciences. He became president of the newly formed University of California. He served there from 1869 until 1881. Another son of Louis and Anne was named Joseph. He attended Harvard. He later taught at Oglethorpe University and the University of Georgia, then at the University of South Carolina and at Columbia, and finally at the University of California, where his brother was president. He was the one that co-founded the Sierra Club with his friend, John Muir. The most famous plant to come from the LeConte Woodmanston plantation is the LeConte Pear. Around 1855, Major John Eaton LeConte purchased a seedling pear tree from Thomas Hogg, a famous plant hybridizer nurseryman in upstate New York. This hybridized pear came from the Chinese sand pear, which produced large yields of fruit, and the French dessert pear, which was prized by gourmets for its taste. This pear embodied the best characteristics of both the parent trees. Major LeConte sent this seedling pear to his niece, Jane LeConte Hardin. She was widowed and living at Halifax House on her portion of the Woodmanston lands in McIntosh County in the vicinity of Riceboro. At this same time, the Civil War was commencing, and little attention was paid to the pear tree until after the war in 1866. Lynder Lewis Varnado, ex-colonel of the Confederate States of America and one-time superintendent of Jane's lands, said this, and I quote, "In 1866, when I returned from the war, the tree had grown into a handsome tree and was loaded with the most delicious fruit. When I came to Thomas County, I brought some cuttings from the tree. I planted these, and those superb trees right there are the result." End of quote. Mr. Varnado was speaking with Henry Grady of journalistic fame in Georgia. I must interject that these are called Hideway tidbits, which means something or someone associated with the Hideway influenced the subject matter. A few years ago, I became friends with the Varnado family that hails from McIntosh family. We hosted the bridesmaids luncheon at our farm for family friend Sherry Edenfield Lindsay. Her flower girls were the Varnado girls. They're a lovely family. Now you know the rest of the story. The history of the southern pear industry began with the introduction of the LeConte pear tree into Thomasville, Georgia in the early 1870s. At one time, there were at least 200,000 trees in Thomas County. Yes, that number has 5 zeros. Growers in those days were getting from $3 to $7 per bushel, which was a fabulous price at the time. The LeConte pear industry extended from Thomas County all along South Georgia, all the way up to Bullock County. Because of the pear blight and lack of care, and mainly no systemized method of marketing the pear industry in South Georgia, this industry fell into a low ebb around 1916. However, on a local note, Albert Braswell and his wife Dottie first made their first product, pear preserves, in Dottie's home kitchen. The year was 1946. Dottie was a dear friend of my mama's, and their daughter Susie was my afternoon babysitter while Mama taught piano lessons after school. What absolutely marvelous memories. Braswell Foods today has a tremendous niche in what's called the fancy food world of products. Let's all plan a trip to the LeConte Woodmanston plantation. Till later.